Right, okay, so you've heard a lot today about clouds and malware and data breaches and worms and viruses, and we all live our lives in this world. However, I'm here to talk about you. Because first and foremost, although all of us work in businesses, run businesses, own businesses, actually, just quick show of hands if you own a business. Quite a few of you. I'll be getting your details later because I would like to commit fraud against you. Okay, so, and you are more likely to be a victim of fraud, by the way. So that's a start. So I'm going to start with some stats. I'm really sorry because I know you've seen lots of stats. I'll try not to be technical because there's not really much that's that technical about having fraud committed against you. So what are the things that are causing fraud today? Well, I think some of these are quite obvious. We know, don't we, that there's been an increase in financial stress in the economy. So actually, just a little stat to throw in there. I was looking at some numbers yesterday that we publish, and actually, first-party fraud, so that's people deciding to apply for something fraudulent in their own name, that's doubled in Wales in the last year. Interesting, and that's a very big sign of stress in the economy. Organised crime. Who deals with organised crime here? Anybody? Apart from the, guy from Microsoft. Yeah, there's a few of you. So that's increasing. And gosh, social networks. They're brilliant, aren't they, for keeping in touch, but they're great for sharing information with fraudsters. I mean, all they need to do is troll that all day and they can get as many victims as they want. And increasing the use of smartphones and tablets and laptops. Okay, so it's a very lucrative trade, fraud. There are no regulations. Who works in a regulated environment here? I work for Experian. We were talking about these things earlier, but we can't take mobile phones, cameras, handbags into our secure areas. We work in a very secure way. But we're all regulated, fraudsters aren't, and they're continually looking for new ways to commit fraud against us and steal our money. And actually, I saw some stats in the brochure that we've all got that says, I can buy your identity. Put your hands up again, company directors. £80 is all it's going to cost me. It's not a lot to pay, is it, to get your identity? And actually, they might steal it now and sell it 3 years from now when you've got a bit more money. All of us. So we just need to be really careful. So, I'm going to put some numbers up. You might have heard this one already. Some little figures that have just popped up there. Any guesses at any of those, anyone? First one, 32%. CIFAS saw a 32% increase in identity fraud in 2009. We saw a 20% increase in fraud victims last year. Experian, sorry, bashing my microphone. But 20% year on year. And we're only touching the tip of the iceberg. 1 in 8 consumers will be victims of fraud this year. I think that's really interesting because we asked earlier, and we're going to ask again in a minute, how many of you had been victims of fraud. And in this room, it was nearer to 1 in 5, which I thought was quite interesting. Perhaps that's because we have got a lot of business owners, company directors in the room. But that's very interesting. And also 38% increase in fraud cases for us, 2009 to 2010, 20% 2008 to 2009, and it's just going up every year. And then finally, a lot of the victims contacting us, no surprises here, have found they were victims of fraud by accessing the credit report, because actually it's often credit's applied for in your name and you become a victim of fraud. Now, I've got a question. So first time question for me. It's actually a similar question to one that you've been asked already today. And I hope it's going to come up there. Yep. It's not just about you, but it's if somebody you know has been a victim of fraud. You've been a victim yourself, you know someone who's been a victim of fraud, and you've never been a victim of fraud. Can you just choose one of those options, please, now? Wow, 57% of you know somebody who's been a victim of fraud. That's frightening, isn't it? That's frightening, and that actually makes our 1 in 8 figure look really small, and it's the tip of the iceberg. Okay, really interesting. So we'll move to the next slide, if that's okay. I don't know whether I can click that on. Right, okay. So just some more stats here for you. In Cardiff, we do profiling research on different areas where fraud's affecting people, and lots of different statistics. Some of you might have seen that research from Experian. But actually the most likely postcode in Cardiff for fraud, in Wales for fraud, is CF10. So if you live around the docks area, I stayed there last night in a lovely hotel, I think some of us did. That's the most likely area for fraud. And actually, when you go outside of Wales, London, clearly, so capital cities, big conurbations, that's where we get a lot of fraud. Now, you've heard lots of numbers quoted around fraud today, and a lot of those were cyber numbers. And I'm not just talking about cyber fraud. This is the National Fraud Authority figure. 38 billion is what fraud will cost the UK economy this year. It's huge. It's huge. And now, that accounts for a lot of people in this room, but 54% of the victims, both in Wales and the rest of the UK, are between the ages of 25 and 44. And actually, we'll talk a little bit as well about where those victims come from. So this is another slide depicting 1 in 8 people being a victim of fraud. So literally, between us in this room, we've either been a victim of fraud or we know a victim of fraud, and there's very few of us who don't, and that's really scary. So has anybody got one of these? So I want my next IM question here, please. Has anybody got a smartphone? So there's a couple of questions here. Pick up your things again. It's, yes, you have got a smartphone, but you don't bother with the PIN number or password because it's a pain or you haven't found it or something. And please be honest. Yes, you do have a PIN number or password. Yes, but no password. You did have it on, but you deleted it because it was a right pain getting past it every time you went into your phone. Or no, you haven't got a smartphone. Can you choose one of those options, please? Wow. So 21% of the people in the room have no PIN number and password. What are you doing here today? You haven't even got the first line of security. Wow, that's a lot of people. Yes, you have got 51% of you, well done. Half the people in this room realise that their mobile phone will data breach them. Your security's at risk. Yes, but you deleted it. I was talking to somebody earlier who said, I did have one on, but it was a right pain having to go through that every time I went onto my phone. And no, I haven't got a smartphone. You know what? And I did hear a quote, I can't remember who said it, I think it was John, he's gone now. And he said, there's no such thing as a smartphone. I don't agree with him. These are very smart phones, we're just dumb users. That's the problem, we're dumb. We need to get smart if we're going to use these pieces of equipment. They're brilliant, they're great for communicating. It's free to put password on. Why don't you? I don't understand. I don't understand, because I'll tell you what will happen. You lose that phone, because we didn't plan to lose it. We've all probably lost phones. I've lost phones before. We didn't plan to lose it. We're going to lose that phone, and then we're going to go, oh no. It's got, did I do that? I made things fall over. Ooh, it's not a smartphone dumb user. Right, so the thing is, you'll lose that phone and then you'll think, oh my goodness, I was on my online bank account an hour ago. Did I shut it down? I was on Facebook last night. Have I left it open? Could they get into my account details? Well, the answer is yeah. And at least the first level of security is giving you something's better than nothing, isn't it? So, just a couple of things. I was once talking to the head of fraud at a mobile phone company. I'm not going to say which network provider it was, but one of them. He didn't have a password on his phone either. It was an iPhone. The next one that I'd add to that is we do a lot of work with the mobile phone companies. One of them, and there's a number of big network providers out there, and I don't need to tell you who they are, just one of them had 24,000 victims of new account fraud last year. 24,000. Anyone got any idea how many laptops were left in UK airports last year? 7. That's a dream. 7. About 1,000? UK and EMEA. We'll go for UK and EMEA airports. No? I had to check. Including the US, 800,000. 800,000, right? Laptops just left in airports. Most of them would have been recovered. But if there's 1 in 8 victims of fraud, that means there's a lot of fraudsters out there. Yeah? How many memory sticks do you think have been sent to the dry cleaners in the last year in the UK? These are only reported, so I reckon it's the tip of the iceberg. 4,500. It's easy, isn't it? You know, just plug it in, pop it in your top pocket, give your wife or your husband the suit to take to the dry cleaners, and off it goes. So you just need to be really careful. Right, if we can go back to the slides. Facebook. Who's got kids? Yeah, me too, 15-year-old. So, our kids use Facebook. We use Facebook. We put our date of birth, our kids, but actually, somebody said it this morning, you're only as secure as the least secure person in your house. So if you've got kids who are 3 and can use an iPad, that's brilliant, but what are you doing about the security on that? You know them pop-ups, they're really annoying when you're trying to get onto your Facebook account, just accept them. You might have antivirus software, but are your kids safe? Are they putting their details online for fraudsters to harvest for later? Are they? Can you confidently say that they're not? Everyone's looking horrified. They're going home to see the kids tonight and say, sort this out. And I can understand why, because it's really frightening. So we need to know what our kids are doing as well, because they are risking their own identities. They're going to university, they're sharing laptops. And if you don't help them to understand the basic levels of security, I love some of the stats earlier for places like Finland, educating early, Austria, educating earlier. We haven't necessarily got government programmes. They're starting to come in, and Wales is leading the fight in that. But ultimately, it's up to us as well as parents to educate our kids. So, different types of fraud. Some of you who work in fraud will know all this, and I apologise for boring you. So, forwarding address fraud, present address fraud, previous address fraud. They're some of the frauds that take place. And I'm just going to give you some examples of the types of fraud that will happen. Now, what often happens with fraud is that they will gather information and go for soft targets first. So I don't want to say this, but it's the truth. It's quite easy to get a mail order account. It's quite easy to get a payday loan. It's very easy to get a payday loan, right? They'll do some soft targets, a mobile phone. Once they start to establish a line of credit and they know that they're getting away with it, they can start opening up lots of lines of credit, and then they'll max out all the lines of credit at the same time and disappear. And by the time, do you know, the average is 416 days to discover you're a victim of fraud. 416 days, imagine the damage that can be done in over a year. It's a lot of damage. And often it's when you go and apply for credit that you find out you're a victim of fraud. So, fraud is spreading as well. So traditionally, I'm joking about company directors and company owners. Yes, you are very likely to be targeted because you are more likely to be affluent. However, graduates leaving uni, renting in lovely nice flats and waterfront developments, yeah? Young singles, students. And we speak to students who have been victims over and over and over again. They live in halls. They don't know who's committing the fraud. Their details have been compromised. Really, really easy. Highest income earners, I already mentioned them, and wealthy retired couples. And there's a lot more data behind this, but I just wanted to put up a sample of the types of people who are likely to be victims of fraud. And I said before that people find out they're a victim of fraud by having access to the credit report. Well, actually, you know, if you're affluent, you perhaps think, and you're not applying for credit, perhaps think you don't need to look at your credit report. There's a much different reason for you to be looking at your credit report. So there's different reasons you should be doing that. And if you are affluent, you should have access to alerting services that show you whether people are applying for credit in your name. That's really important. So this is just a little bit of inside information from Experian. We dealt with about 9,300 victims of fraud last year. And like I say, that is the tip of the iceberg. And we deal with the most victims of fraud, but people don't know what to do when they're a victim of fraud. So these are people who have contacted us and are a victim of fraud. And you can see there some of the, it's more for me about showing the stats in growth here. So what's growing? So fraud in mobile phones is growing, fraud in mail orders growing. But they do start with these smaller value items. And then they go for the big ticket stuff. And this is just an example, a few examples of some people who have been impacted by fraud. So here we've got Abigail. She's 25, she lives in London. She didn't know, because this was present address fraud, she didn't know she was a victim of fraud until she found out because she joined Experian. And she had debts on there that she didn't know about. And that happens all the time when people join credit management services. They go, hang on a minute, I didn't apply for that. And it just tells you there that we helped her, that this confirm this is a fraud, and we helped her clear her name. But often, you know, it's your dream house. You're just about to go for that mortgage. You go to your bank, you apply for the mortgage, and you get declined. And that's the first time you find out you're a victim of fraud, because you're not looking actively at this. Change of address fraud. I'm not going to read these to you. You can read them for yourself. But this was somebody who had changed his address, and criminals. Now, we all change address when we move house. And most of us use the post office redirection service, or we contact all the people that write to us. But we don't, do we? I mean, I know I've done it. You move house, you forget to contact that company that you used to do business 10 years ago with, because you do. And then they write to you. I mean, recently, I'm not going to say which company, but one of the road breakdown companies very helpfully sent me all of my details, including my name, address, date of birth, passwords, everything through the post. Really nice of them to send me that. Had I not lived there, because it was, do you want to take our services again, just sign here. Wow, great. If I was a fraudster, I'd got everything I need now to nick your identity. So wasn't very happy about that. Next one, previous address fraud. So tenancy fraud, I'll put that one up. So a lot of us, I've got a couple of rental properties, I'm sure lots of other people have as well. And if you live in them and you move out and you don't forward your address, or the people who used to live in the tenancy move out and they don't sort it out, then tenants move in and commit fraud. And that's a very big place that fraud is committed. There are lots of ways this happens, but how can we be safe? How can we be protected? And actually, one of the ways to be protected is just to know what's going on in your credit file. You can do this free. You can just get hold of that information. You should be alerted, especially if you're affluent. Stolen documents. So I remember a guy in my team coming into work, and we work in this game, and he'd had his house broken into, and he'd had his laptop stolen. And actually, that's the point that you suddenly think, oops. So we talked about your password on your iPhone earlier, and you probably do have password protection on your laptop in your house, don't you? I hope so. I hope so. But I hope you're not one of those people who writes them all on a post-it notes and sticks them on the corkboard in your office just in front of you, because I know that the online cybercriminal, he can't see those, but the thief in your house, he can see those, right? So just think of those things. Or is in your filing cabinet taking your passport and your driving licence and your recent utility bills. What fun you could have with that, yeah? So, you know, stolen document fraud. When your house, we work with a lot of insurance companies to refer people at point of claim, because at point of claim, suddenly you're worried about your identity. It's not just the theft, physical theft, and the horrible mental trauma you go through when your house is broken into, but what else did they take? And you might not even find out for months what's missing. So top tips. I know this sounds obvious, but that 49% of, or was it 51% of you in the room who have not got a password on your phone, please, it's in general settings. You can find it really easily, depending what phone you've got. Go to the manufacturer's website and find the settings and set the password. Check your credit report, shred documents. I mean, again, John talked about this earlier, cross-shredding. Buy yourself a decent shredder. It's only 20 or 30 quid to get a decent cross-shredder, and don't let anything leave your house that's not gone through that shredding machine. Don't share personal information. All them people saying happy birthday, they're not really your friends. Tell your kids not to put their date of birth. My daughter, bless her, she said, Mum, it's all right, I haven't put my year of birth, I've just put the date. And I went, no, you can't do that, because if you put the date, they look at your friends to see when they were born and they've got it anyway. You know, you don't put that stuff on there. Make sure you set the privacy settings, maximum privacy settings. I have seen some LinkedIn profiles that you wouldn't believe. It literally showed the colour of their underwear. I mean, goodness me, it's madness. Be careful what you're sharing. It might be good to share things about yourself, but those people are looking for that and they will use that against you. Some of these obvious ones. Always make sure you do a redirection. Make sure your antivirus software, your spyware, your anti-malware is up to date. Have it in the first place. You know, the hardest way to learn is by being a victim. The easiest way is to stop yourself being a victim. Don't go on and play silly games that ask for personal information, watch for phishing attacks, and really don't just take photocopied security symbols or copied and pasted security symbols, but actually make sure that you're only dealing with reputable companies in the online space. They're simple things, but it isn't just us. How do you educate your kids, your partner? Make sure that anybody that you're associated with who's operating in that space understands the threat. Teach them how to do that before you teach them how to go onto Facebook. Thank you.